tax freight train is bearing down on your retirement. To protect yourself, you'll have to harness the power of zero.
Hello and welcome to the Power of Zero show. This is your host, best-selling author of The Power of Zero, Look Before You Lerp, The Volatility Shield, and Tax-Free Income for Life, David McKnight. If you are looking for someone to help you navigate all of the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, why not head over to davidmcknight.com. Opt into a complimentary strategy session. We'll happily connect you with a member of our elite POZ advisor group, among the very best advisors in the nation at tax-free retirement planning, trained, vetted, qualified personally by me. If you are a financial advisor looking to level up your game, head on over to powerzero.com. We are happy to have a chat with you. If you're looking to get any of my books in bulk, you can do so at davidmcknightbooks.com. If you want to buy them in single copy, you can do so on Amazon or anywhere you buy fine books. And would love a follow on Twitter. It's at McKnight & Co, at McKnight & Co, or on Instagram, it's David C. McKnight. All right. So the last time we spoke, last time I gave a legislative update, we talked about how Joe Manchin had said a firm no to Joe Biden's signature legislation, the Build Back Better plan, in its current form. This was a big deal for Power of Zero planning because had he gotten that legislation through, it would have required the changing of the U.S. tax code to pull it off. And had they done so, that would have extended the Trump tax cuts for middle America by another 8 years. And that means that those in the 22% and 24% brackets would have continued to enjoy those brackets through 2029. So that would have given you 8 full years to enjoy these historically low tax rates. And guess what? If you don't have to pay 25% and 28% tax brackets beyond 2025, when converting tax-deferred dollars to the tax-free bucket, then your retirement savings are simply going to last longer. You're going to be able to wring a lot more efficiency out of your retirement dollars. Now, on my last legislative update, I discussed how some pundits were leaving the door open for Joe Manchin to return to the table if the Democrats could dangle a carrot of some sort, if they could somehow sweeten the deal. Well, as it turns out, the Democrats did lure Joe Manchin back to the table. And when they did, they discovered that he was prepared to float a revised bill of his own. Okay, so this is just a really interesting development, and certainly the plot continues to thicken. So he comes back to the table with this $1.8 trillion compromise bill that basically tweaked the parts of the bill the original bill that he didn't like. It tweaked the climate change bill. Of course, he's from West Virginia. A lot of coal miners in West Virginia. A climate bill would certainly impact his state. There were childcare provisions in the bill that he also didn't like. So his version of the bill tweaked both of those provisions. And so these were 2 big sticking points for him. And anonymous sources also said that President Biden and Senator Manchin were close to reaching a deal. So negotiations resumed, they began discussions, and they became very, very close to reaching a deal. Now, had they succeeded, this would have extended the Trump tax cuts for another 8 years through 2029. This would have actually been very good news for Power of Zero retirement planning strategy, but bad news for the fiscal condition of our country. It would have at once increased the likelihood of higher taxes and put you in a better position to protect yourself against those high taxes. Well, according to an article on yahoo.com entitled West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin may have put the final nail in the coffin on President Joe Biden's social spending plan from yesterday, that compromise proposal has been totally taken off the table. According to the Washington Post, Manchin has said he is no longer interested in discussing the bill with the White House. In fact, if you listen to his tone a little bit, he sounds even a little bit impatient, maybe even a little bit snippy. He says, quote, "I'm really not going to talk about Build Back Better anymore because I think I've been very clear on that," Manchin said earlier this week. "There is no negotiations going on at this time, okay?" So, like I said, sounding a little bit snippy. So, of course, without Manchin's vote, the 50-50 split in the Senate means the budget bill can't go forward. It's dead in the water. And, of course, as we approach midterms, Once midterms hit, and if all of the prognostications are correct, Republicans will most likely take back either the Senate or the House, and potentially both. So now that it appears that Joe Manchin is no longer going back to the negotiating table and the Trump tax cuts are going to expire in 2025, how does this change things when it comes to power of zero retirement planning strategy? Well, to help illustrate how this might change, I'm going to share with you a case study that I gave on a webinar call this morning that can help sort of illustrate how all of this could play out. Now, the case study involved a couple of 63-year-olds who had $1.5 million in their tax-deferred bucket and wanted to get to the 0% tax bracket. Their magic number in their tax-deferred bucket, or the amount they needed in that bucket to produce RMDs that would be offset by their standard deduction and allow them to get their Social Security tax-free, was about $400,000. And to get their ideal balance before tax rates went up for good in 2026, or in just 4 short years, they would have to shift an astounding, exorbitant $330,000 per year. Now, given that this $330,000 would have been piled right on top of all their other income inside their tax cylinder, that would have easily pushed them into the 32% tax bracket, which, in my opinion, is probably not worth it. Now, if they decided to instead ignore that 2026 deadline and stretch that tax obligation out over 8 years, they would only have to shift $190,000 per year. So over the next 4 years, that would keep them in the 24%. So in the first 4 years of that 8-year time frame, that would keep them in the 24% tax bracket, at least the 24% marginal tax bracket. And then starting in 2026 and in the ensuing 4 years, they would be in the 28% tax bracket, which is far better than the 32% marginal tax bracket they'd be in if they shifted over just 4 years. So when you average out that marginal tax bracket over the full 8-year shifting schedule, it feels like about a 26% average marginal tax bracket. And that's far better than shifting it over 4 years and experiencing a marginal tax rate of 32% in all of those years. Now, remember, the 32% marginal tax rate is not the same as a 32% effective tax rate, but it does give you an idea of how much higher their tax rate would be on the margin if they had to shift $330,000 per year for 4 years. So the bottom line, folks, is this. Given how Manchin seems to have put the final nail in the coffin for Biden's Build Back Better plan, we have to start looking at potentially stretching tax obligations out over longer than 4 years. Remember, the closer you get to 2026, the less sense it makes to try to get all of the heavy lifting done between now and then. I mean, think about it next year, 3 years. What if you had $1 million you had to shift over 3 years and the money was growing at 6.5% per year? So the bottom line is we got to start looking at potentially stretching out our tax obligation over more than 4 years. That could potentially bump us into a slightly higher marginal tax bracket, but in many cases that beats having to get all the heavy lifting done in only 4 years. So I will, however, give you a caveat. I would warn against letting your shifting plan go too long and get too close to 2030 and beyond. The closer your shifting plan gets to 2030 and beyond, the more likely the government will have to raise taxes to pay for the interest on the national debt. Remember, we are closing in on $30 trillion of national debt. I listened to a recent economist prognosticate on where interest rates are going. He's seen at least 3, if not 4, interest rates happening over the course of the next year, which means that the cost of financing, just paying the interest to service the national debt, will start to skyrocket it and will slowly but surely consume more and more and more of the federal budget. And every year that happens, every little uptick in interest rates increases the likelihood that tax rates between now and 2030 will have to rise dramatically or we go broke as a country. So these exploding interest rates may actually constrain the federal government to raise taxes, leaving them no choice in the matter. So whatever you do, make sure, this is just my personal opinion, but make sure you get all of your asset shifting done before 2030 or so. So that's really the podcast for today. A bit on the shorter side, but I wanted it to be really succinct and to the point. It looks like Build Back Better is totally dead, not dead with the faint hope that Joe Manchin will come back to the table. He says, look, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. So it looks like he is totally checked out of negotiations and nothing is really going to happen with Joe Biden's signature legislation. Once the midterms roll around, Joe Biden will assume lame duck status for the second half of his term. And unless Republicans gain control of the House, Senate, and the presidency in 2024, it looks like Trump's tax cuts will expire in 2026, meaning that there's increased likelihood that most of us will not be able to get our shifting schedule completed before tax rates go up for good. So we may have to take a look at staying in lower tax brackets between now and 2026, 2026 and beyond. Those low tax rates will go up slightly. The 22 becomes the 25, the 24 becomes the 28. Even though those tax rates, your effective tax rate will go up, it beats bumping up into a 32% tax bracket in the short term to try to get all your heavy lifting done. And that ultimately will allow you to have an increased likelihood of stretching your retirement dollars over your full life expectancy. Once again, if you're looking for help to navigate all of these various issues, we're happy to help. Head over to davemcknight.com. We'll connect you with a member of our elite POZ advisor group. Among the very best financial advisors in the nation, trained, vetted, qualified personally by me. If you're a financial advisor looking to level up your game, head over to powerzero.com, opt into the free 3-part video series. At any point during that video series, you can schedule a call with us. Once again, would appreciate a follow on Twitter at McKnight & Co. or on Instagram, David C. Knight. Thanks, folks, for being with us, and we will look forward to chatting with you same time next week.